Hello friends, in this video we are going to discuss about the weightage of the marks allotted for per chapter in the Karnataka CET exam. As we know, the Karnataka CET exam is conducted by the Karnataka Education Authority, in short it is known as KEA, for the filling up of the seats of the engineering and other professional courses. The CET exam consists of 4 papers, that is physics, chemistry, maths and biology. In this video, we will be discussing only about the weightage of marks in the physics. The physics paper consists of 60 marks. Each question carries 1 marks in the physics. The physics syllabus is divided into 2 parts, that is the first year syllabus and the second year's syllabus. Most of the times, the first year syllabus has got less weightage than the second year's syllabus. In the first year syllabus, consists of 15 chapters, as well as the second year syllabus consists of 15 chapters. In the first year's 15 chapters, the weightage of the first year's 15 chapters is relatively less compared to the second year's 15 chapters. Usually what happens in the CET exam for the physics paper is the 75% of the marks or 45 questions will be coming from the second year's syllabus, and 15 questions or 25% of the syllabus will be asked from the first year's syllabus. Now, the first year's syllabus consists of 15 chapters, and I am going to discuss about those chapters in brief, about how the questions were asked from those 15 chapters in the first year's syllabus in the past 5 years, or the questions asked in the past 5 question papers of this Karnataka CET exam in the physics. So the first chapter in the first year's syllabus is physical world, which is just as an introduction chapter to the syllabus. So in that chapter we don't have anything conceptual or anything in the numerical way, so we may not be asked any question from the first chapter. Now going to the second chapter, which is units and measurements, over the past 5 years we can see that there has been no questions asked in one of the papers, and it can be 1 question or it can be 2 questions asked from this chapter. The units and measurements chapter is a conceptual as well as a numerical one, but majority of the syllabus in this chapter is conceptual. So there is a more possibility that you are going to get a conceptual question rather than a numerical question. The conceptual question can have the dimensional formulae or the relation between the dimensions of the quantities, or it can also contain the conversion from one system of units to another system of units. The chances of numerical questions being asked is that the only place they can ask the numerical based question is the errors in the measurements. It can be based on the relative error or the percentage error. You will be given some equation and you will be asked to calculate the error in the measurement of the final result. So that is about the units and measurements. The next 2 chapters, that is the motion in a straight line and motion in a plane, you can expect 1 question or 2 questions from these 2 chapters, and these 2 chapters are both, they have the conceptual points as well as the numerical ones. The conceptual part contains that the kinematic equations, and the kinematic equations based numerical problems can also be asked from the chapter 3. The chapter 3 also introduces the concept of acceleration due to gravity, and that is there also you can be asked some question which on the basis of the kinematic equations or the acceleration due to gravity. It also introduces to the concept of relative velocity, so there is also a chance that you may get a question from the relative velocity. The chapter also introduces to the basic concepts like the instantaneous velocity, average velocity, instantaneous acceleration, average acceleration, and also to the concepts of the uniform motion and the non-uniform motion. Chapter 4, which is motion in a plane, which it also consists of conceptual as well as numerical problems. The conceptual part consists of introduction to vectors, the dot product and the vector product. It also has the projectile motion, in which we study about the range of a projectile, the time of flight, and the height of the flight. The questions from this chapter can be based on the theoretical concepts of vectors and scalars. It can also consist the numerical problems based on the projectile motion or the uniform circular motion. Next chapter is the laws of motion. This is mostly a conceptual question, so there is a maximum chance that you will get a conceptual question from this chapter. But this is also not to be certain that it is only the conceptual part. They can also ask the question from the numerical part. It can also be based on the law of conservation of momentum. On the law of conservation of energy, it can be based on the 3 Newton's laws of motion, or it can be also based on friction. The last part of this chapter also contains the banking of roads. Now the banking of the roads means they can ask a numerical question from that part, or they can ask a theoretical question based on the formula. From this chapter you can expect 1 question or 2 questions. They can be conceptual or numerical ones. The next chapter is work, energy and power. This chapter is also broadly a conceptual chapter. You can expect the questions based on the work energy theorem, or you can also be asked numerical problems on the calculations of energy or power. So you can expect 1 question or 2 questions from this chapter also. Next chapter is the system of particles and rotational motion. It is a large chapter and it has got many concepts into it. Starting from the concept of center of mass, it introduces to the rotational motion. It also introduces to the concepts of the rotational motion such as angular velocity, angular acceleration and angular momentum. It also introduces to the concept of torque and also the equilibrium of rigid body. So from this chapter you can expect 2 to 3 questions, mostly conceptual, but also there is a chance that you may be asked a numerical based question on the concept of moment of inertia or the calculation of torque. The chapter also consists 2 theorems, which are like the parallel axis theorem and the perpendicular axis theorem, which are mostly conceptual. Next chapter is the gravitation. You can be asked a concept based question on the Kepler's laws, or you can also be asked a numerical based questions on the escape velocity or the orbital velocity of the satellite. The next 2 chapters are mechanical properties of solids and mechanical properties of fluids. Both these chapters consist of many concepts, and the question also you can expect on a conceptual basis. From both these chapters you can get at least 1 or 2 questions from these 2 chapters. These 2 chapters are mostly conceptual ones. They consist the concepts of Young's modulus, bulk modulus and the shear modulus. The fluid properties also consist of the Bernoulli's theorems and the Torricelli's principle. So from these 2 chapters you can expect some conceptual questions. Maybe 1 or maybe 2 questions may be asked from these 2 chapters. Next chapter is the thermal properties of the matter. From this chapter you may get 2 to 3 questions based on the thermal properties of the matter, or the heat radiation or the heat transfer from one body to another body. You may expect some conceptual questions from this chapter, but also there is a chance that you may get a numerical question as well based on the basis of the heat transfer. Next chapter is thermodynamics, in which you can expect the question based on a theoretical question, that is the conceptual question based on the Carnot cycle and the Carnot engine. Next chapter is the kinetic theory of gases. It is mostly a theoretical chapter. It's a very small chapter. You may not get any question from this chapter, or you may get 1 question from this chapter. It is mostly based on the kinetic theory or the gas equation, that is the universal gas equation. The question can also be asked on the basis of the degrees of freedom of the gas. The final 2 chapters of the first year syllabus are the oscillations and waves. These 2 are large chapters, so you can expect 2 to 3 questions from these 2 chapters. In the oscillations you can get a theoretical question based on the simple harmonic motion, or you can get a numerical question based on the concept of simple pendulum or a loaded spring which is oscillating with a fixed frequency. The major concept of this chapter is the simple harmonic motion, so you can expect 1 or 2 questions from this chapter. The last chapter is waves. The waves chapter is a large one. You can expect some 2 to 3 questions from this chapter on the basis of velocity of sound, or you can get it from the Doppler's effect. The chapter also introduces to the concepts of the harmonics, so you can also expect the questions based on the harmonics of open pipe and a closed pipe, or also it can it also has the concept of harmonics of a stretched string. So you can expect some conceptual questions as well as some numerical questions based on this chapter. That was from the second year syllabus. We have got 15 chapters, and all of these chapters are having very large concepts, and most of the concepts are based on many variety of the principles, and many variety of these principles are going to give us many questions from this chapter. And also we know that 75% of the syllabus, or most of the times 45 questions, are being asked from the second year syllabus. Now, talking of the second year syllabus, it starts with electric charges and fields. It starts with the concept of Coulomb's law, then it enters into the concept of electric fields, electric flux, then it introduces to the Gauss law and the electric dipole. From this chapter you can expect some questions based on the Coulomb's law, which will be mostly numerical ones. You can also get the questions from the electric fields, mostly numerical ones, and also from the Gauss law, which can be numerical ones. The conceptual questions are rare in this chapter, so you can expect 2 to 3 questions, numerical questions from this chapter. Second chapter is electrostatic potential and capacitance. This too is similar to the first chapter. It has got many concepts. It introduces to the concept of the potential, then potential energy, and at the end it introduces to the concept of the capacitance. So you can expect some questions, mostly numerical ones, based on the principles of electrostatic potential or the capacitance. There is a more probability that you will get a question based on capacitance rather than potential. So you can also expect some theoretical and conceptual questions based on the principle of equipotential surface. Chapter 3 is the largest one of the entire PUC syllabus. In the theory also it has got much weightage. In the CET also you can expect many questions. As we can see in the past, it has got some 6 to 8 questions, mostly in the previous papers. This chapter is current electricity, and you can expect many questions, theoretical, conceptual as well as numerical ones from this chapter. The theoretical questions you can expect are from the drift velocity part or the current density part, but the numerical ones will be based on Kirchhoff's laws, Wheatstone's bridge and the meter bridge. So you can expect 6 to 8 questions from this chapter. Next chapter is the moving charges and magnetism. From this chapter also you may get 3 to 5 questions. As we can see in the past also they have asked 3 to 5 questions, and in this chapter you may get theoretical or conceptual questions based on Biot-Savart's law or Ampere's circuital law. But there is also a chance that you will get numerical questions based on the concepts of solenoids and toroids. There is also a possibility that you will get a numerical question from this one based on the force between the current carrying conductors, that is the parallel conductors carrying current. Next chapter is the magnetism and matter. In this chapter you may get the questions based on magnetism and the properties of magnetic materials. So mostly the chapter is theoretical one, so you may expect some conceptual questions, and these conceptual questions may be based on the susceptibility on which the substances are classified as diamagnets, paramagnets and ferromagnets. The chapter also gives the relation between the dipole and the bar magnet. That is, a current carrying solenoid is behaving like a bar magnet. So in this chapter you will get mostly a theoretical question, but also you can expect the numerical one. The next chapter is electromagnetic induction. This is also a theoretical or conceptual chapter, so most probably you may get a question. You may get some questions from this chapter on the theoretical basis. You may expect some 3 to 4 questions from this chapter based on conceptual points of this chapter, but there is also a possibility that the question may be asked, it can be a numerical. The numerical questions will be mostly based on the calculation of self-inductance or mutual inductance, or the EMF induced in a current carrying coil, or in a coil due to a current being carried in another coil. Next chapter is alternating current. In this chapter also you can expect 4 to 5 questions. The chapter is broad one, so it has got many concepts, but the chances of getting a conceptual question from this chapter is less, but there is a more probability that you will get the questions based on numerical questions. So the numerical questions may be asked that can be based on the concept of that is the RMS value of the current or voltage, or the average value of the current and voltage, or phase difference between the current and voltage when the AC is applied to resistor, capacitor or inductor. The chapter also consists the concepts of resonance, the resonant frequency, the quality factor and the power factor. You can also expect these questions, the questions based on the power factor and the quality factor. Or there is also a chance that you will get a numerical question based on the principle of transformers. Next chapter in this syllabus is the electromagnetic waves. It is one of the smallest chapters in the syllabus. So you may expect no questions or one question, and that one question will be a conceptual one because there is not much calculation in this chapter. The next chapter is ray optics and optical instruments, and from this chapter you can expect 3 to 4 questions, and these 3 to 4 questions can be on conceptual basis or the numerical basis. The conceptual questions can be based on the numerical, that is the mirror equation or the lens maker formula. The numerical questions can also be based on the mirror equation or the lens maker formula. The questions can also be asked on the basis of the angle of minimum deviation for a prism or the magnification in telescope or a microscope. You can also expect some question based on the human eye or the defects in the human eye. Coming to the next chapter, that is the wave optics, it introduces to the concepts of the interference, diffraction and polarization. These three concepts are going to lead to some questions, that is theoretical questions, or you may get some conceptual questions or the questions which are going to use the concepts of these three, that is interference and diffraction and the polarization. You can also expect some numerical questions based on the Young's double slit experiment, the interference pattern, the bandwidth or the fringe width, and also you can expect some numerical questions based on the diffraction, that is again the fringe width or the distances between the two fringes of given wavelength. In this chapter also you can expect 3 to 4 questions which can be conceptual or numerical ones. The next chapter is dual nature of matter and radiation. From this chapter you can expect 2 to 3 questions, and those 2 to 3 questions will be mostly numerical ones on the principle of photoelectric current, that is the electron emission, or it can be based on the stopping potential when the electrons are getting emitted from the vacuum tube. The next chapter is atoms. From this chapter also you can expect 2 to 3 questions. It's a small chapter. Mostly it deals with the structure of atom and the empty space present between the nucleus and the size of the atom. The questions may be asked from the size of the hydrogen atom or the radius of the electron orbitals in the hydrogen atom, or it can be also based on the spectral series, that is the Lyman series, Balmer series and the Paschen, etc. So you can expect some theoretical question or some numerical questions from this chapter as well. Next is nuclei. The nuclei chapter introduces to the concept of radiation or the radioactivity. From that it goes to the radioactive law, and at the end the chapter gives the nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. And from this chapter also we can expect some 2 to 3 questions based on theoretical information or the theoretical concept. There can also be numerical questions based on the concept of mass defect and the energy, that is mass energy Einstein's relation, that is the E equals mc square. You can expect 2 to 3 questions. Some of them can be conceptual, some of them can be numerical ones. Next is the second biggest chapter of the second year's syllabus, that is the semiconductor electronics. From this chapter you can expect 3 to 5 questions, and because the chapter is mostly theoretical ones, so you can expect some theoretical questions mostly based on the energy bands or the structure of intrinsic semiconductors or extrinsic semiconductors, the production of holes and the electron pairs. The semiconductor electronics chapter is mostly theoretical ones, hence you can expect mostly some conceptual questions. The questions can also be asked from the applications of diodes such as rectifiers or the transistors. The transistors, mostly the question can be asked from the amplification part, that is the transistor acting as an amplifier. So you can expect some 3 to 5 questions. Most of them will be theoretical ones or the conceptual ones. The chapter ends with principles of digital logic. From that part also you can expect one question which will be relatively easier compared to the other. The syllabus ends with the communication systems. You can expect one question, or maybe in the rare case you may get 2 questions from this chapter. The questions will be mostly theoretical ones, as the chapter mostly deals with the theoretical concepts of the elements of the communication system or the bandwidth of the communication system. The questions can be also based on the amplitude modulation or frequency modulation or the modulation index. The chapter can also ask the question based on the size of antenna, which that is going to be based on the principles of electromagnetic waves as well. You may expect 1 or 2 questions from this chapter. That was about the questions that can be asked from the first year's and second year's syllabus. The second year's syllabus, most of the times it carries 75% of the marks, and the first year syllabus carries 25% of the marks. So 45 questions will be mostly from the second year syllabus, and only 15 questions will be from the first year syllabus in the Karnataka CET exam. That is for the physics paper. With that, I hope it gives a clear picture of how the questions may be asked from the first year syllabus and the second year syllabus. The purpose of this video was to make the students aware of the situation, how the questions will be asked from the different chapters of the first years as well as from the second year's physics syllabus. The questions will always be based on the NCERT book, so better go through each and every chapter. You must have already done for the theory exams, but for reference you can refer to the other books as well, but the questions will be mostly from the NCERT syllabus. With that, I conclude this video for the weightage of marks, chapter wise weightage of